Good morning and welcome to this week's tarot reading. This week, we're exploring the idea around when something beneath the surface seeks your attention. What is the pebble that they put in your shoe? And, this was a bit of an interesting one because I started with the idea of provocation and ended up going through a side road of irritation and eventually kind of landed on this idea of the conversation between the conscious and the unconscious. And so one of the things that I was thinking about is the way that our brain is programmed to find answers, right? Like if I have a problem, I need a solution. If I have a problem, there has to be a solution and I have to find the solution. We're so quick to jump from problem to solution that we often forget that some problems have no solution, or that some problems, the solution is just acknowledging that there is a problem without having to solve it. So what I realized is that there's different situations, different events, different experiences that we have that simply want to be acknowledged. And in fact, our subconscious might go so far in getting our attention for this as to put a pebble in our shoe. So that's kind of the metaphor that I built today's reading all around. So while I was pondering the question, I started thinking about a recent experience where I had gone out walking, and when I got about halfway out on my walk, my heel was starting to bother me. And I was starting to, you know, sit there and go, do I have a pebble in my shoe? Is there something wrong with my shoe? Is it maybe my sock? Because maybe I wore a different sock. Um, there was just, my brain was just trying to jump to all these solutions that it could be. And eventually what I ended up finding out was that like I just kind of did the whole walk. And by the time I got home, I ended up finding out what the problem was that I had gotten a little bit of sand in the back of my sock. And as I was walking, the sand stayed there. And as I was walking, it was rubbing against the back of my heel and had irritated the back of my heel so much that the skin had been basically worn raw, right? And so it was interesting because from that point, if I had dealt with it right when it first kind of came up, I could have gotten the sand out of my sock and I would have been fine. But at this point now, I had done the whole walk. I had irritated the back of my heel and I had to put a band-aid on. And so I needed to make sure that for the next little while I was out walking, that I had to have that band-aid on the back of my heel so that I was not causing more damage than originally. Now I sat with that and I realized that the shoe sock sand combination was only a way for me to like to kind of grab my attention. It wasn't the problem. What I realized was is that it got to the point where my ankle needed to have a band-aid put on it because I was ignoring what my body was telling me. I had gone for a walk because, they tell you go for a daily walk, it's good for you. But that day, particularly when I had gotten up, I was tired and I kind of pushed myself and I said, you committed to this, you have to go and you have to do it. And so when I was walking, because I live on a bit of a dirt road, my fatigue had my steps, you know, faltering, and I kind of dragged my feet a little bit and I was walking with a different gait and everything, which is what allowed the sand to get kicked into the back of my sock from when I was walking. If I had just given myself the time to listen to what my body was saying and how my body was wanting just to kind of rest, take it easy, maybe just sit outside instead of going for a walk, I could have avoided the whole rigmarole of going out and having the sand um, and all that. So yeah, so it's interesting how sometimes we get it in our head that here's a problem, here's the solution, and we forget that maybe if we take ourselves out of the equation, that just going from problem to solution might actually be more detrimental than it is of value. Because like I said, I ended up with an irritated heel, which made it difficult for walking. And, it's kind of hard to go grocery shopping when you have a very sore heel that makes you kind of limp because you don't want it to rub against the back of the shoe. So anyway, that's all of the processing and path and everything that I took to get to today's reading. So the purpose for today is to open up space to explore what literal or figurative pebbles might be calling for your attention. And as I start to shuffle the cards, I will be shuffling in the question, what part of your subconscious is seeking your attention? And we have one that's already, we got one pebble already. So what part of your subconscious is seeking your attention? And I think we kind of forget too that the subconscious speaks in a language that is very, very different from the language processing part of the conscious mind. So sometimes it takes us a while to understand the language of our subconscious. Right. Pick our cards. And place them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I had a flipper. So we'll get that one at the end. So what part of your subconscious is seeking your attention? That's what we're going to be exploring. And our first question asks, what part of you is reaching out? So what part of your subconscious, what area of that deep well that we are is looking for your attention? And here we have the Six of Cups. So the Six of Cups is saying that there's something from the past that is reaching out. There's this connection to dreams, this connection to hopes and aspirations that we had at a younger age. And keep in mind, a younger age could have been yesterday. It all depends. But there's a sense of nostalgia here. And maybe the pebble that you're getting is you pick up a book and all of a sudden there's this feeling of nostalgia, or you walk into a building and there's something there that just kind of triggers this, maybe a memory from when you were younger, maybe a dream. You have a conversation with somebody and you start to think about things from your past, things that you had wanted to do, things that you had hoped for. And now it's kind of coming to the forefront. And so when we're looking at this idea of the pebble and how it's kind of talking for the subconscious and trying to kind of get our attention, what you're being asked right now by your subconscious is to pay attention to when, and I don't want to put like good or bad, but like what you want to pay attention to is when there's some kind of memory that surfaces that leads to a physical or an emotional reaction. A lot of times, like you might drive by a house that you used to live in and you look at it, you go, oh, okay. And you keep going. Those are just natural moments of memory, of connection, of our history. But this is really asking for what in your history, what part of your history is maybe looking to be healed, maybe looking to be reclaimed. There's pieces of us that kind of get broken off, and this might be that part of that like soul reunion that's coming forward. So our subconscious is saying there's something there in who we used to be or what we longed for that is going to kind of be calling on our attention. And that's what we're being asked to really kind of tune into today or for the next little while. Next is, what are the pebbles you may be ignoring? So these are the things, there are going to be actual concrete kind of pebbles, maybe not in the literal pebble, but there's going to be something, some kind of obstacle that these are going to be connected to. And so we have the Page of Cups. So this is interesting because this might be indicating that there's going to be a lot of openings, a lot of possibilities for us that are going to be those kind of pebbles that we're having. And what's interesting is we've got the Page of Cups up in the north, where it's all about the concrete, the tangible, which is why we're looking at the physical life here. And having the Page of Cups show up in this position is indicating a couple of things. And the first that I love is that we have, the Six of Cups, which is connecting us back to our roots, connecting us back to our innocence, connecting us back to the time when we thought we could create the world of our dreams. And the pages are the youngest of the people that we find when we encounter people within the tarot. And so I think it's interesting that now we have this physical connection to a younger version of our heart, of our creativity, of our innocence. And so one of the things that we're looking at when we're looking at the pebbles is going back, like as we're going through our day, looking at really how different things that we're doing in our day are bringing forward an emotional reaction, an emotional response, an emotional based memory that comes from when we were younger, because these are things that are calling for our attention. These are the places that we're being asked to really tune back into and say there's something there that maybe this is the time for us to, bring it here into our lives. Because a lot of times when they happen when we're younger, we may not have the capacity, we may not have the skill, we may not have the ability or the resources to follow it at this point. And so now we're being asked to dive back in to the world of our childhood, to the world of our innocence, and to really allow that to guide what our subconscious really wants to share with us and to say to us. Now we want to look at what feels raw, right? So this is kind of connecting to the rawness that I had on my ankle when I was walking, because sometimes if there's something there that's trying to catch our attention and we ignore it, eventually the irritation will lead to some kind of rawness. And so here we have the Nine of Wands, and we have the Nine of Wands in the south, which means we have a fire card in a fire position. And so this whole idea of the rawness is going to be amplified. So the more that we want to ignore it, the more that we want to walk away from it, like my example of going for a walk, right? If we deal with the rawness as soon as we really notice it to the point where it's an irritation, then we're going to have less problems with it going forward. It's going to eat up less of our energy. It's going to eat up less of our time. But if you do what I did and go for a 20-minute walk with this irritation, then when you come back and there's blood kind of on the back of your heel from rubbing it raw, we only have ourselves to blame for that. And so one of the things that this is also pointing out is that we have to understand that we are the ones that are choosing what we're paying attention to. So if there's something that is looking to get our attention and we're ignoring it, it reminds me too kind of when you go to the grocery store and there's a child that wants to get their mom's attention, right? Like they'll be like, mom, 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 and they'll get higher and higher and faster until the mom just basically snaps, right? And turns around and says, what? So this is kind of the energy that we're looking at here, is like, at what point will you pay attention to what's calling for your energy and what's calling for your commitment and your passions? Or are you going to be like, are you going to respond to it quickly? Or are you going to let it just kind of push you until you snap? So the Nine of Wands is an interesting one to have here, because it's, in some ways, it's borderline burnout, I want to say, because it's interesting because with the wands, unlike some of the other suits, the higher up you get, the less energy you actually have, because that's what happens when we jump into something with all of our heart and all of our passion, all of our desire, is that we have to make sure we're jumping into it knowing that we have to have enough energy to see it through to the end. And so the Nine of Wands is coming and saying to us, look, the reason why we feel raw is because we doubt the fact that we might have the energy or the ability to do it. There's something that we have to finish first before we can commit to these things that are being called to us. And it does kind of go back to my idea of, like when I went for the walk and I ignored the irritation, it was like in my head, I'm like, okay, so I have to go, I have to finish this walk because it's going to be good for me, when really it was the least good thing for me to do at that time. And that's what the Nine of Wands is saying, like it's saying you've committed yourself to these things and you have to ask yourself, what is the cost? What is it taking from you? And is it really worth it? Because sometimes, I think a side of the Nine of Wands that is often overlooked is the Nine of Wands says you can quit at any point, right? Why are you pushing yourself? Why are you doing this to yourself when you can quit at any point? Just because you've committed to something that you were passionate about in the beginning does not mean that when the passion's gone and the energy's gone, that you have to keep pushing forward. So I think this is one of the things that it's asking about that rawness, is that it's that balance, right? It's that balance between, okay, do I want to see this through to the end, regardless of the cost it's going to have on me? Or have I understood enough? Have I valued myself enough to be able to say, I need to walk away from this? So now we're going to move into the next one, which is, how might your emotions become the bridge between your conscious and subconscious? And the reason why I brought this in is because the unconscious, right? Like our subconscious speaks in images, it speaks in feelings, it speaks in things that are beyond words, because words have a very limiting connotation to them, and they can easily be misunderstood or create a lot of confusion. And so the subconscious will speak. Now, having said that, keep in mind that when the subconscious speaks, until we understand the language of our subconscious, there is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of reading in on things and projecting from that language-based mind. But it's understanding that there is a whole different way that we can interact with that. And so how might your emotions become the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious? And here we have the 10 of Cups. So when we are in that sense of completeness, when we are feeling satisfied, when we're feeling whole, when there's this peace about us, that's when we can really, know that we have dealt with all of the issues that the subconscious is wanting to bring out. Because a lot of times, if we're sitting there and we think we've got what we want, and we think that we're at where we want to be, you can sit there and have the picture perfect life, and still there's something niggling, still there's something unsettling, still there's some kind of sensation within the body. There's a feeling, a longing, a desire, a something that is there. And every time that we feel that, it becomes an opportunity for exploration. And keep in mind, I started off by saying that not everything has a solution. This is the same thing. If we are in a situation where we're struggling and we're pushing to find that peace, that satisfaction, that grounding, all of those things that help us to, drop our shoulders, open our chest, breathe, and just be, without feeling that there's a push, there's a drive, there's a desire to have to get something. That's when we know that the communication between the conscious and the subconscious is flowing, right? It doesn't mean that we're perfect, because we'll never be perfect. And it doesn't mean that the situation is perfect. It just means that in that moment, there is harmony between the two sides. And how does this, now that you've got that bridge, how does this help you to understand the language of your subconscious? And so the language of the subconscious is interesting, because here we have the Seven of Swords. And when you look at it first, right, you go, Seven of Swords is all about deception. It's all about, coveting and treachery. And you're like, so that's the language of my subconscious? No, that's not what this is saying. What it's saying is that it helps to understand that these two things cannot exist at the same time. And so if there's feelings around, I don't have enough time. If there's thoughts around, I have to push, or if there's jealousy, or if there's ideas, right? Like, these things are all based from feelings, right? We are never jealous of somebody because it's a logical thing. We're jealous of somebody because we feel that they have something that we want. We're never angry at somebody because it's just a logical based thing. We're angry because anger comes from an emotion. And so if we are sitting here and we understand what it feels like to be at peace, to be content, to be what it is that allows us to breathe, then that's how we can understand the language of the subconscious, because this actually is the language of the subconscious. So when this comes up, when the themes of deception, when the themes of when we feel we have to lie, when we feel that we have to cheat, when we feel that there's something that we have to do that takes us out of alignment, that puts us questioning our values or our morals or our ethics, that's when we need to be tuning into the language, the actual language of the subconscious, and saying, what is going on here? Because the desire to lie That might be the pebble. That might be the subconscious coming and saying, hey, there's something that we need to look at here. And then, as I said, I ended up with a flipper. So the extra card that we got today is the sun. And this one's really interesting because this one is really telling us we need to shine the light on the places we may have been afraid to look at. And especially after coming right after the Seven of Wands, or sorry, the Seven of Swords, you really want to look at that and say, what part of me am I trying to deceive? What stories am I saying that are trying to, explain away or justify the things that are going on that I might be afraid of, that I might want to have to ignore? And the sun is saying that that's not possible, right? Like where we are right now, we have to put a light out there to shine bright enough so that we can actually see what's going on. I have to say, what's interesting is the flipper that we got is the only major arcana card of the whole spread. And so without this one, it would have all been minor cards. But having the sun come out and the way that it did, where it was flipping things around, is really kind of pointing to us that there are two sides to everything. And only by bringing everything out into the open and really allowing us to see clearly what is going on, will we be able to really have that bridge between our conscious and our subconscious, so that when we're going through life, we're more aware of when the subconscious is speaking to us and how it's speaking to us through the different ways that it puts a pebble in our shoe. Now, looking at the cards, we have 3 cups, right? So of the 5 cards that we have of the original spread, 3 of them are cups, which means right now we're looking at really what are our emotions telling us? What is it that we're feeling? What is it that we're sensing? How is it clouding? How is it highlighting, coloring the stories that we're saying? And then from there, we have 1 wand and we have 1 air. And what I'll say about both of these is that the fire of wands is sitting in the fire of the south, which means our energy and our motivation is really what we need to be kind of tuning into as well. So when you're tuning into how you're feeling, also tune into, am I passionate about this? Is this something I really, really love and really, really want to do and have the energy and the capacity to do? And then the same thing with the swords. The swords is in the air position as well. So this one also will be highlighted and strengthened within this one. And what we're really being asked to look at is, what are the stories that you're saying that are justifying you continuing on that walk, right? Without paying attention to the pebble in the shoe. And so how are you excusing that away, right? How are you twisting the story, changing the story so that you're getting yourself farther and farther away from like that heart call, that nostalgia that's calling you forward? So another very interesting read for today, and I hope that you got something out of it and that there's something within the reading that speaks to you. In the meantime, I wish you all the best, and I will see you next week for another reading. In the meantime, take care, and I will see you around the webs.